it's really easy to follow Jesus when everything's going right? It's really easy to follow Jesus when, man, you just feel like doors are opening and blessings. You're like, wow, I was praying, God, open the floodgates of heaven and it's raining and this is like God and this just like feels like everything's just going good and right. And it's easy to follow God when everything seems like it's going good. But when things get tough is the true test of your faith and your perseverance. And if you will hold on is when it gets tough. Hey, when you get that phone call about your health, that 3 doctors said, hey, it's going to be all right, but you get that 4th one, and the doctor's saying, hey, we actually just got the final biopsy back, and it's actually cancerous, and it's stage 3. It's a lot harder to follow Jesus and to raise your hands in worship. It's a lot harder sometimes to hold on to the faith when you know you only have so many days left to live. Hey, what about holding on to the faith when your marriage seems to fall apart? You waited your whole life, said this is the person you're going to commit yourself. You stayed faithful, you stayed pure. Now you're in marriage, and 3 years into marriage, it's falling apart. You're looking at your life, you're saying, I'm in my 40s. After this, if this falls apart, what's next? I don't know what's going on. I don't even really like this person. I'm frustrated. We're fighting every time I'm in the home. It's fight after fight after fight. And God's saying, but will you hold on? When you feel like you're drowning in debt and the bills are just taking you by storm and you feel like you're just working more and more, but the bills keep getting higher up and you feel like, I just want to give up. Why am I even giving God my time? Why am I dedicating so much to Him? Look at my life. Do you still hold on? See, life is like that bull that's raging and fighting to get away from you, but will you still hold on? I want to turn to a passage in the Bible today, a passage that's powerful. It's Hebrews chapter 3. And Hebrews chapter 3, if you're someone who you feel like, man, I am barely holding on, or I feel like I'm slipping away, I'm losing my grasp. If you feel like that this morning, you feel like I am just holding on, I'm thinking about falling away, I'm thinking about doing this, then this passage is for you this morning. Hebrews chapter 3 is going to teach us how to hold on. The first point, if you're taking notes this morning before we jump into verse 1, is if you're going to hold on, you need to fix your thoughts. Hey, if you're going to hold on, you need to fix your thoughts. Chapter 3, verse 1, therefore, holy brothers and sisters. Who's he talking to? He's talking to us, Christians, who share in the heavenly calling. Fix your thoughts on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. Hey, you know why I love the Bible? And you know why I love the book of Hebrews? Because he's not talking to Christians who are like, hey, they're just living really great and they couldn't fall. They have no problems. No, he's talking to believers who are wrestling with their faith and they're thinking about falling away. The author of Hebrews is addressing believers who are wrestling. They're getting persecuted for following Jesus and they're looking and saying, well, hey, I'm getting beat. I'm losing money. I'm having this and that happen to me. I don't really know if I want to follow Jesus because this is what I'm experiencing on behalf of Jesus. I mean, these are Christians who are experiencing persecution, suffering. It's getting difficult for them to follow Jesus, and they're thinking in their mind, maybe I should fall away. Maybe it's not for me. Maybe this wasn't the whole right thing. I don't think I want to keep living like I was living. I think I'm about to give me some space, me and Jesus. And the author of Hebrews says, listen. I want to remind you first who you are, brothers and sisters. He says, you are holy brothers and sisters. See, if you look at the first word here, it says, therefore, holy brothers and sisters. Whenever you see the word therefore in the Bible, you always ask yourself, why is it therefore? And so he's building off the thought from the last chapter, and the last chapter's final thought is that Jesus is the high priest who paid for your and my sins. And he's saying, hey, Because Jesus has paid for our sins, you aren't just forgiven, but you're part of God's family. See, Jesus didn't just come to make you a friend of his. Jesus came to make you a family member of his. Think about that. That God didn't just stretch out his hands and die to say, hey, I want you to be an acquaintance. I want you to be a friend of mine. I want you to be casual. No. God said either you're my family or you're nothing to me. That's what God said. I love that. Hey, when I come before the throne room of God and I'm praying, I'm like, hey, Daddy. Hey, God. Hey, Abba. Hey, Father. I'm not just saying it because it's a religious term. I'm acknowledging my position with God. I'm saying I'm not just somebody else that's praying to you. I am your son who's praying to you. Say, one of the first things to remember when we're going through persecution and trials, you say, well, I want to focus on all my actions and what's going on in life. God's saying, hey, focus on who you are to change what you do. If you never know who you are in Christ and you just think you're some other person that God died for, then hey, you're just some other person. But if you know that you're the son or daughter of God, you start living in a different way because you are not just somebody, but you're royalty. He starts out saying, hey, holy brothers and sisters. The word holy means set apart, different, special. God is saying you are not like everybody else. So guess what? Don't live like everybody else. God is saying you are set apart. If you're a child of mine, you are special. You are designated for a purpose. I have called you before the beginning of the foundations of earth. You're my family. And he's saying, hey, therefore, because of what Jesus has done on the cross, you are now family of God. And then he moves on with the thought. He says, who share in the heavenly calling. Well, he says, hey, this is a powerful thought right here. What he's saying is not only are you family of God, but he's saying God called you from heaven, a heavenly calling. That you didn't say, hey, God, will you look? No. God called down and said, hey, I want that one for me. That one is mine. It was according to his purpose that he chose you and he called you. It was a heavenly calling. It wasn't a calling from earth. See, while we're going through our trials and our seasons, not only is it important to remember that you were called from heaven, but you were also not just called from heaven, but you were called to heaven. So you know why that's powerful? Because my hope is not here on earth. Hey, I'm not just called from heaven, called from one who sits on the throne of the universe, but I am called to heaven. When I die, be it a car crash, shot in the head, or die of old age, I go immediately to the presence of my Savior. I go to Jesus. I go to heaven, and heaven is greater than anything you have ever experienced here on earth. I go to be in the presence of the one who is perfect in an atmosphere that is perfect. He's saying, hey, no matter how bad life gets here, remember that you have heaven the moment your eyes are closed. The moment that your spirit departs from your body and you breathe your last breath, you don't go to a place that's dark or it just becomes black or it just becomes an abyss. No, you go to the presence of Jesus into paradise. See, for a Christian, death is not a loss, but is gain. I remember going to Africa when I was 16 years old. I don't know how they convinced me to go to Africa when I was 16. But a buddy of mine was going on a trip to Africa and he said, hey, you want to go with? It's a Christian mission trip. And I said, yeah, I've never been on one. Got a bunch of shots, went on the trip. And I remember out of all the powerful things that happened there, out of all the life-changing things, there was one that stuck me. There was one that struck me more than any of the other ones. I remember going to a worship service, dirt floor, leaves, branches that cover the roof, hot as can be, worshiping with these believers. And I looked at their life and I was confused why they had so much joy. I remember walking a lady from her house 2 miles to a dirt hill that has a pipe coming out of it with a line of people waiting with these yellow buckets that, man, they were extremely heavy to carry back. They would wait in the line to get water. This is shower water, drinking water, cooking water. And I looked at these people's lives as a 16-year-old, and I looked and I said, why are they so happy? Why do they have so much joy? And I looked at my own life and said, man, why am I so miserable, depressed? I have so much more than these people, and yet my joy is nothing. And I look at their life and these believers that were over there, and I looked at, they had nothing. They had a fraction of what I had at 16, and yet they had joy that I had never experienced before. I looked at their life, and after talking to them, you know what I realized? That they were not trying to bring heaven down on earth. They weren't trying to make this heaven. Like, let me see how big I can get my house, and let me see how many cars I can have. Let me see how comfortable and great I can make my life here on earth. No, they realized that their life would only reach a ceiling. So they said, I'm not living for this world. I'm living for eternity. I'm living for heaven where true riches can be stored up that I could never get or achieve here on earth. You know what I realized it was? I had a problem with what I was focusing on. And I have a feeling that some of us in here have the same exact problem. That our problem with joy and our problem with peace has a lot to do with what we're fixated on and what we're focused on. See, we have such a hard time with our joy and our peace because we're constantly looking at what other people have and we don't. We're constantly scrolling through the highlights of people's Instagram and Facebook feed and looking at, wow, their life is so great. They get to go on that vacation. Wow, their boyfriend's so nice. He took them on that date. Wow, that person, wow, that's a really nice car. That's nice 2018. Must be nice. I mean, I'm driving 2002, doors falling off. I got tape on the window. Must be nice. And so we end up living this joyless, broken life. We end up living or looking and thinking, how much can I accomplish? How many accolades can I get? Or we end up living, feeling broken, like, wow, I don't have any accolades. I don't have any success. I don't have a lot of money. So I'm really nobody. See, the problem that's wrong is what we're focused on. Listen what the verse says to us. What are we supposed to fix our eyes on? It says, what are you supposed to focus on? What should your attention be on? It says, fix your thoughts on Jesus. See, when you're going through the storm, stop looking at the waves and start looking at Jesus. When you feel like your life is falling apart, stop looking at the broken pieces and lift your eyes up and focus on Jesus. When you look at your marriage and you feel like it's falling and shattering, that's happening to it. Instead of just focusing on where your marriage is at in the state, take your eyes off your brokenness. Take your eyes off your problem. Take your eyes off what you don't have and fix them to Jesus. This idea of fix your thoughts is attentive, thoughtful. It's not a one-time action. It's a repeated action over and over, day after day after day. Fix your thoughts on Jesus. Fix your mind on Jesus. Fix your heart on Jesus. Fix your eyes on Jesus. Fix everything that you are on Jesus. See, I think our problem is that we have wandering eyes. And we get focused on things that really aren't important in the grand scheme of eternity. And we end up living most of our existence for things that fade away with our earth instead of living for eternity. See, when you fix your eyes on the one who's eternal, you live for the things of eternity. When you fix your eyes on the things that are just here and just here in the present, they will fade away. Where are you fixing your eyes? Where are you fixing your thoughts? What do you think about? Because what you think about is what's most important to you. See, we fix our eyes on Jesus, not only who he is, but what he has done. You are willing to trust in the midst of your fear, your uncertainty, your danger, your difficulty, because you know who is with you. It says, fix your eyes on Jesus, whom we acknowledge as our apostle and high priest. I'm going to go through this fast. Jesus as our apostle. It's the only place in the New Testament that Jesus is referred to as our apostle. This means that Jesus is the messenger from God. Jesus had apostles, he had disciples, they were his messengers who would spread the message throughout the world. Jesus is our apostle because he's the messenger on the behalf of God. But it doesn't say, fix your eyes on Jesus the apostle. It says, fix your eyes on Jesus the high priest. See, in Jewish tradition, the high priest was the most important religious figure. There was no one higher in the religious scheme, no one higher in the religious category than the high priest. The high priest would go into the Holy of Holies, the most sacred spot, once a year and offer sacrifices on behalf of the Israelites who had sinned. What the Bible is saying is that Jesus is not just the high priest or just our high priest, but he was the high priest above all high priests. That Jesus, just as the high priest would go into the Holy of Holies and offer a sacrifice on behalf of the sins of people, Jesus has offered a sacrifice of himself, his blood, who he is, on our behalf. And guess what? Jesus doesn't have to do his sacrifice year after year after year. He did it one time and that was good enough. Hey, Jesus paid the price one time and that price paid it for all eternity and forevermore. We have a high priest who has made us his family and has paid the price for our failures and sin. Hey, whenever you're wrestling, remember to fix your thoughts. Number 2, if we're going to persevere in this walk of Christianity, we need to hold firmly to the end. Listen to verse 2. And we are his house. This is verse 6. And we are his house if we indeed hold firmly to our confidence and the hope in which we glory. So as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as you did in the rebellion. What the author of Hebrews is telling us here, he starts off by saying, hey, remember, you're God's people, you're God's family, you're God's household. And if you are going to remain, you need to hold on. I've heard this idea before, and I don't really want to go into this, but I've heard this idea before. I run into people who say, well, I made a decision when I was, 5 years old. I prayed a prayer. I don't even know if I really believe in God anymore or what's going on, but I prayed a prayer when I was 5, so my eternity is kind of locked and sealed because I prayed a prayer. I've met people who have been around the church, been around Christianity, and I've seen them on a totally different path. They're walking so far from the Lord, down a different path, and I'm like, wow, how did they even get there? Have you ever wondered, if you've been around the faith long enough, you've looked around and said, is that person really a Christian? Because I look and their life is so far from living like Jesus. And they were around church for a season, but now they're living so far and distant. And what I've read in scripture, the deciding mark of if someone's a believer or not, you know what it is? If they hold firmly to the end. The Christian walk is a marathon, not a sprint. It's not just about praying a prayer when you were 5 years old and then you can go live however you want to live. No, you say, well, how do I know? Well, the distinguishing mark, if you're a follower of God, guess what? There might be a season where you fall away or a season where you wrestle, but you will come back to God because once you're a child of his, you can't not be a child of his. When you're walking with God, when your name is written in the book of life, it's either written in it or it's not. And one of the factors that confirms that is that you hold faithful, you hold firmly to the end. So if you run into someone who's said, I prayed a prayer when I was 6, I don't really know what I prayed, but as long as I prayed it, I kind of checked the box, and I'm 30 years old now, and I haven't really, I don't really live like Jesus, and I kind of do this and that, but, I prayed a prayer. Guess what? According to the Bible, hold firmly to the end. If they don't turn their life radically back to Jesus, they were probably never saved. Jesus didn't say, hey, pick up your cross when you're 5 years old and then I'll meet you in eternity. Jesus said, pick up your cross daily. Pick up your cross daily and come and follow me. The author of Hebrews here is encouraging Christians who feel like and felt like they want to just fall away. He's saying, keep holding on. You know, when my sister was younger, she had a bad habit of not putting her seatbelt on when she was in the car. And my dad told her 1,000 times, put your seatbelt on, put your seatbelt on, put your seatbelt on. Marissa, put your seatbelt on. And she would always just forget and not do it. And so my dad tried a different tactic. He said, well, you know, I'm going to show her this story of this girl who didn't wear a seatbelt and she went through the window and she has scars all over her face now. And so he showed Marissa this story of this tragic accident where this girl now lives with her face all scarred up. And he used this picture to try to teach Marissa a lesson. And so from that day, Marissa wore a seatbelt like every time, 2 seatbelts on, locked it. She was like making sure she had her seatbelt on because she didn't want to go through the same thing that this other girl had gone through. You know, one of the greatest things we can learn in life is to learn from other people's failures and mistakes. The author of Hebrews is going to bring us to the mistakes of the people of Israel. He's saying, hey, you don't have to go through the same things that the people of Israel went through. Live a different life. Learn from their mistakes and change your actions. See, the people of Israel, you see, it talks about the hardening of the heart in the time of rebellion. He's saying, hey, hold firmly and don't be like the people of Israel that were in their time of rebellion. They hardened their hearts. See, if you remember the popular story of the people of Israel were God's people living under Egypt, living under Pharaoh, slaves. I mean, there's no life lower than what they had to live. God sent Moses, 10 plagues, they were freed from the land, and God had called them to the promised land, and they came from Egypt, so they were in this in-between period right here. And God said, listen, I'm bringing you to the promised land that I promised your great father, Abraham. That's where I'm bringing you, so just hold on. But they got real tired, real restless, real uncertain. It got real difficult, and they didn't want to be here anymore. It says, as you did in the time of rebellion, they hardened their heart. During the time of testing in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested and tried me, though for 40 years they saw what I did, that is why I am angry with that generation. You know what the Israelites struggled with? You know why God was so angry with them? Because they did not trust God on what he said. See, that's what most gets tested in our life when we're really going through it, right? Hey, I can read the Bible all day, and I know people who could quote the Bible backwards and forwards, but you know when it gets really real? It gets really real when you have to apply the Bible to your life. The Bible says, be more than hearers of the word, but doers, right? So when the Israelites were here, God was promising them. He's saying, hey, listen, I'm promising you the promised land. It's the promised land. Come on. That's where I'm bringing you. It's going to be a land that like no other land you've been for. It's going to be your land. You can establish your generations there. I'm giving it to you. I will clear the land for you, give it to you, prepare it, box it up, and wrap it with a bow. And the Israelites were like, I don't know, God. There's some really strong, big strongholds over there with some huge men. I mean, we sent spies, and there's like warriors and armies and tribes. Like, I don't think we can take that. We're okay staying here. And over throughout the Old Testament, God's like, listen, I got it for you. Just go. I will give you every single victory. And the Israelites are like, ooh, I don't know, God, like that's dangerous. We could lose our life. We're good here. We're comfortable here. God's like, no, go. And they just stayed. They stayed not because they didn't want the land. They stayed because they had fear and they did not believe and trust what God said. Hey, when you are in the wilderness, when you are in your time of testing and you feel alone and depressed and broken, like there's not a person to talk to you in your life, do you believe how you feel and how you're living? Or do you trust the word of God that God is always with you? He said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Do you trust your own feelings and emotions? Do you trust the word of God? One that I talk to people a lot about is this season of, man, I'm, work versus giving my time and my energy and focusing on the things of God. I always bring people to Matthew chapter 6 where Jesus says, if you put my kingdom, hear this promise, you put my kingdom and my righteousness first and all these things will be given to you. What's he talking about here? He's talking about everything you need to live. Food, water, clothes, gas, whatever you need. God's like, listen, you put me first and all of this will be given to you. And yet I run into so many people that won't give God a second of their time. A second. And God's saying, this is a promise. Or you lose your job and you're living in the wilderness. You're like, God, what's going to happen? I don't know. Finances, bills, mortgage, all this. And God's like, would you put me first? Oh God, I don't have time to put you first. I got bills and mortgage and all this. And you're in the wilderness. You're in the testing. And God's saying, would you trust my promise? Would you trust my promise and what I've told you? We look at the Israelites and we say, how? Listen to what God did in the Israelites' life. He freed them with 10 miraculous plagues in Egypt. He guided them day after night, during the day with a pillar, a cloud, and at night with a pillar of fire. Supernatural, like a tornado of fire in front of you. God. He made a way through the Red Sea. Say, hey, Red Sea, boom. Protected them from the Egyptians who were pursuing them and drowned them. Provided water. Hey, we need water. God's like, boom, rock. God, we need food. Help us. Boom, manna from heaven. I mean, time after time, he healed the people after they were bitten by the snakes. He said, hey, look at the bronze serpent. I'll heal you. Boom. And after all this, they still didn't trust God to bring them to the promised land. Let me ask you this morning, what is your wilderness? What is your testing period that you are not trusting God to go into because you have fear and worry and ultimately you're not trusting the word of God? What is it? That God is saying, it's yours, grab it, take it. And you're saying, I don't know, God, it's dangerous, I could lose, I could this. Trust me. See, God is calling some of us to things that you couldn't even imagine. He's saying, go, walk to the door, turn the doorknob and get what is yours. And yet because of fear, we stand at the door wanting what's behind the door, but we will not get it because we do not trust God. Hey, you know what's the scariest thing about the Israelite story? Is that God says, that is why I was angry with the generation. Their hearts are always going astray and have not known my ways. So I declare on oath in my anger, they shall never enter my rest. See, some of us think that if I'll just lose it for a season, but then when I get things back on track, I'll get it again. You know, there's some things that once the doors close, you never get it again. There's some things that God has for you in a season that if you don't live in the right way and accept it and trust him to take that step, that door will be closed forever on your story. And it's not because God didn't want you to have it. It's because you were too scared. You were fearful. You didn't trust the word of God. And God is saying, I will win the battle. Trust me. Trust me. To win the battle you could never win. Trust me to open the door you could never open. Trust me to free you from your addictions and your brokenness. Trust me to guide you when you're in darkness and you're unsure. Trust me to make a way when every other door is closed. Trust me. Trust me to protect you when you feel like everything's around you trying to swarm you, trying to take you down and break you. Trust me when you need to be provided for and you feel like I don't have another dollar to pay my bill. Trust me. When you need healing because you're so broken, trust me. I'm not trying to minimize anyone's trial or their testing or their season or their difficulty or their burden. What I'm saying is God's bigger. I'm not trying to minimize it and say, well, you know, it's not really important. You're not really wrestling with something. That depression is just a figment of your imagination. That addiction's just something you just want it more. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, listen, God's bigger. And God's done it in the past. He's been faithful. He will always be faithful in the present. So are you willing to trust God to win the battle you can't fight? To heal the places of brokenness you won't let anyone into? To protect you when you feel like, man, you are crumbling down. People are coming after you. You trust God to do what you can't do. Because if you can't trust God, then you will never experience what was meant for you. We need to hold on firmly to the end. Hold on to the hope and the promises and the perseverance. We need to fight and not quit. And third and last, we need to exchange encouragement. Verse 12. See to it, brothers and sisters, that none of you has a sinful, unbelieving heart that turns away from the living God. But encourage one another daily, as long as it is called today, so that none of you may be hardened by sin's deceitfulness. See, the author starts off by saying, hey, listen, be careful, be wise. Last week we talked about how we as Christians can drift away from the truth. Today we're just talking about how you can leave it completely and totally. And the author's saying, hey, fellow Christians, followers of Christ, be careful, be alert, be aware. He says, listen, someone who has a sinful, unbelieving heart is somebody who turns from God. Now, I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I think about this thought of unbelief, I just go right to the thought, my mind goes right to someone who doesn't believe that God exists. But what he's talking about here is not if God exists or not. What he's talking about is he's talking to Christians who believe in God. And so unbelief is not the inability. I heard it was said this. The unbelief is not the inability to understand, but the unwillingness to trust. He's not talking about, do I believe in a God or not? He's talking about to people who believe in God. And he's saying, hey, our problem is in trusting. Our problem is in trusting. Is God true? Is God always right? Is the Bible really infallible? Is it inerrant or does it have errors? Is there problems in the Bible that I can't really trust or I don't really know? Some of it's true, but some of it's not. Is this all true or all not? I talked to a guy last week, young guy, kids. And he said, when I moved out to California, he said, man, I was doing really, really well over here. I was walking really strong. I was walking with the Lord. And then I moved out to California. He said, I was in California. He's like, I got caught up in a bunch of things, man. I really felt like my relationship with God distanced. I fell away for a season. I got involved in things. And I listened to him and I looked at him and I said, I can guarantee that in your season of walking away from God, that you changed your friend group. And he's like, yeah, 100%. I said, I could guarantee that when you walked away from God and you were living away and you were getting involved in stuff, I can guarantee that you weren't super connected with the church and the body of Christ. And he's like, yeah. I said, were you before? He said, yeah, I was really connected. I was really plugged in. And just because I moved, I didn't make those relationships anymore. And I said, boom. I said, you know why I know that? Because I've heard enough stories and lived life long enough that I know that who you have around you determines your spiritual fervor. Who you have around you, you wonder why, man, I'm on fire for Jesus. I guarantee that the people that are on fire for Jesus, I look at their life and they have people who are on fire for Jesus around them. And then I look at other people's lives and like, man, I don't feel like I had what I used to have. And I feel like I'm still like distant. I feel like I'm not right. I want to be more on fire. I want to do more. But guess what? You won't change your friends. What Hebrews is saying here is the importance of having Christians around you, the importance of having people who are serious about their faith in your life, the importance of coming to church, the importance of going to small group week after week and going there and saying, I did that, I did the studies. The importance of doing it is the encouragement that helps you not fall away from God. The importance in it, that any of us can have a hard heart that falls away from God. We get caught in sin and we do this and that. Any of us can go there. The difference between someone who doesn't and does fall away is being in a community of faith where they receive encouragement. Think about that thought for a minute. When I started to read Hebrews a year ago, it started to transform my mind. I started to read the power of encouragement in our life. So you could have just lost somebody that you loved, and you feel like, man, I don't know. I talked to a guy last week. I was having a conversation. He said, man, I was walking with Jesus. I lived pure. I was a virgin until I was married. I got married later in life. 2 years after I'm married, 2 years, I get the perfect girl. She's for me. I'm walking with the Lord. 2 years after I marry her, I find out that she has like stage 4 cancer. And she lived 2 more years after that. He said it was super hard trying to follow God after losing your wife. Like you prayed, you did things right, and you lose your wife from cancer. He's like, I was so angry and mad at God. And when the marriage is falling apart and you're just at rock bottom, you don't even know where to go anymore. You've been to so many counselors, you could name all the counselors in the book. When you feel like the medical bills are overwhelming, school is disheartening, you're injured or sick, you get a report, life is falling apart. When you feel like you are in the middle of the trial, the fight of your life, what you need is encouragement, not another self-help book. What you need when you're running and you're tired and you're at almost that late mile, you're like, I'm just ready to give up. I'm tired. Man, I've been fighting this fight. I've been walking. I've been running. I've been living. What you need is encouragement. Come on, man, keep going. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep going a little further. Man, I'm tired. I want to give up. I don't think I have what it takes. No, you have what it takes. Come on, man, keep pushing. Let's go. You got a little bit more. I'll run alongside you. What we need is encouragement. What we need is encouragement in our life when we feel like I am tired of running. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of the persecution. I'm tired of the suffering. I'm tired of the hardship that comes with Christianity. What we need in our life is a community that brings us in and encourages us to keep pushing forward. I've seen encouragement in 2 different places. I've seen it through words and actions. Sometimes I need that word into my life. Just somebody comes and says, Josiah, you're a man of God. You have a purpose and a calling. You have a destiny. God has gifted you and given you talents and wisdom beyond your years. Josiah, God has given you, keep pushing on. Don't give up. Keep pushing on. I need that. I don't know about you, but I need that. Hey, sometimes I get encouragement, and this is one of the other ways, is through action. When I'm just around Christians who are serious about obedience, who are serious about purity and living for God, when are serious about giving God everything that they are, when I'm around people that are on fire, man, I don't know about you, but I just start getting on fire. When I see people who are excited, like, Josiah, look what I just read in the Word, and I took this and I applied it, and I did this at work, I started talking, I'm like, man, you got me excited, you got me pumped up, you got me on fire for Jesus. When I get around people that are on fire for Jesus, guess what? I get on fire for Jesus. And if you don't have people that are on fire for Jesus around you, guess what? You will not have a fire. Encouragement is the fire that we all need in our life. I've never run into somebody who says, I received too much encouragement today. Keep it for somebody else. I'm overflowing, just bubbling with encouragement. Can people just stop encouraging me? No, we all need to receive encouragement. I can't tell you how many times I've gone up to somebody and just randomly just spoken into their life, who they are, what God's doing in their life, what I've seen. And I've had so many people now just start tearing, just weeping in front of me. And they say, wow, I needed that. You don't even know what I'm going through right now. You don't even know the brokenness. You don't even know what's going on with my kid. You don't even know the news I just got from the doctor or heard. You don't even know what I'm going through right now. That's what I needed. I needed that. I needed that. You don't know how many times in my life that I've walked, I've lived, I've been the leader, and I needed a word. I felt like life was falling apart. I just needed one word, and somebody comes, maybe even somebody I don't know that well, and they say, hey, can I just tell you, man, I really see your work ethic, and you're really working hard, and this is like, they speak into your life, and that's all you need to keep you going. It's just that one word of encouragement. Sometimes it's so much easier to receive encouragement than to give it. But the difference between somebody having a hard heart that lives different and away from God, the difference between somebody falling away, the difference between somebody living a life they don't want to live apart from Christ is encouragement. Does it say yearly? No. Monthly? No. Weekly? Bi-weekly? No. It says encourage daily. Because it's a day-to-day walk that we make with Christ. Encourage daily. It should be part of your ritual, part of what we do, part like breathing air. We should encourage. It should just be part of the language that we speak as Christians. Are you encouraging those around you? See, sin is always deceitful. It promises more than it offers. And we get hardened when we fall to the lie of sin's deceitfulness. When we start believing, yeah, that maybe that is better. Maybe there is something outside of Christ. Maybe there is something over here. And we start getting dragged away. We start believing a lie that isn't true. And we find out that we end up falling away from Christ. We get tricked. We're holding on. And somebody goes, hey, there's something better over here. You're like, it's better, the life, there's no suffering, all this like, and we let go. We let go because we believe that that's better. And we get there, we hold on, we're like, oh wait, this is worse. Let me try something else. Let me try something else until we come back to Christ and be like, this is it. See, sin is deceitful. And that's how always the hardening of the heart starts. We become less and less sensitive to sin. We sin and sin more. And we don't even realize the damage or the effect it has in our life. It becomes every day. It's just something I do. You become more and more distant from Jesus. I want to attack this last thought. This is more of a modern notion, but I run into this. I run into people who say, hey, church stuff, that's for some people. But I'm not really into organized religion. I'm just not like, I don't really like to gather. I'm not like a big group gathering. I'm more like me and God, like just my house and me, we do this and I read my Bible and sure you're not part of a church, small group? No, just me, just solo, right? You just need the Bible, prayer, and God, right? Isn't that just kind of like, I'm spiritual. I hear that so much. I'm spiritual. And I go, well, you're not biblical. You might be spiritual, and the Bible talks about a lot of different spirits, but you're not biblical. Because when I come to the Bible and I hear it left and right, and it's a really good thought, and people pat each other on the back like, you're spiritual, I'm spiritual, but you're not biblical. Because what the Bible talks about is that you need people in your Christ. When people say, I don't like organized religion, they don't like church, do you know that the church is called the bride of Christ? I don't know many people that say, hey, they come up to my parents like, hey, Mark, I really like you, but your wife, like, I don't really want anything to do with her. You'd be like, well, she's my other half. No, I like you, but I just the other half. The church is the bride of Christ. God died for the bride. You were called to be part of not an individual, adopted, just one only family. God's called you to be part of the family so that you could walk alongside one another, encourage each other by the way that you live and by the words that you speak. You were called to be part of a church. And guess what? Those that try to live on their own end up falling away because they have fallen into the deceitfulness of sin that says, no, you could just do it on your own. It's deceitfulness that thinks that you don't need others. You don't need them in your life. But the reality is we do. We need each other to walk in a faithful way before God. Let me finish off with this. Can I have you come up? Would you come up? Mm-hmm. Just for a minute. And Tony, would you come up? I want to give you a picture. It's a terrible thing when you have to pull one of these out. You know what's the even worse thing is when you don't even have one of these. Which is a reminder, I need to order one of these. It's a terrible thing when you don't have one of these and you're like, man, it's like, oh, Lord, just. These are important to have because every once in a while, and somebody does it a little bit more in our house, Grant. But some people leave their lights on when you're driving and the car dies, right? It's a terrible thing. You turn it on, it's just not going because somebody left the light on or the door open. And you realize that one battery ends up dying. And so, you can pray over your car, you can try to keep turning it on, but the problem is the battery. It's not the igniter, it's the battery. And so, Tony, come over here. So what happens is we go through the walk with Christ, and we're walking with him, and it's getting tough, right? Marriage starts getting rocky, man. You're taking on a lot more work, and it's like you're feeling the burden, you're feeling the weight, you're trying to share your faith, but man, people are persecuting. They're just like, man, don't share that with me, man. I don't want any of that. Like, you're the Christian Bible thumper, and you're trying to walk. You get some bad news, and you're trying to walk with Jesus, but you're in the wilderness. You're being stretched, and your battery's dead. You need something else to jump you. You need something else to get you going. You need a start in your life, because on your own, man, you're withering, you're falling apart, you are going through it. And that's why we have other Christians in our life. See, the power of when the power of when you get a car started, you can't just do it on your own. You know what I've realized with the car? Is you get one car, you pull it close. You get the other car, you pull it close, and you take out these cables. You attach two ends to one battery. If I could get it untangled. You attach two ends to one of the batteries. The car is dying. You can hold these. The car is dying. You're the car. Let's give it up. He needs a start. But guess what? You don't get that jump start when you're far away from people. When you have to charge the cars, what do? You put them hood to hood. You get them as close as you can, but because these cables can only reach so far. It's the same thing with encouragement in our life. We need to be in close proximity to people. Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, people offend each other. But guess what? The encouragement outweighs it all. Because when you have another brother who's on fire, and he's starting to live for Jesus, and you've been around him, guess what that does? His fire, that energy transfers to him, and now he's like, man, I wasn't winning, I wasn't doing this, but now that I have this brother, now that I have somebody else living, and here's the power. Guess what? It's not always going to be a one-way transfer. There's going to be some times where you feel like, man, I'm wrestling. Man, I'm battling. Man, I feel like things are falling apart. I feel like I want to fall away. I feel like I can't take another step. I can't fight another minute. And that's why you have another brother say, hey, let me speak into your life. You're a man of God. God's changing you. God's using you. He's working in you. You have a destiny and a purpose. God is going to use you for power. And it's the encouragement transfer. Can I tell you something? If you're not in a small group, if you're not part of the life of the church, not just Sunday morning, but if you don't know people, then you don't have this. And it might not be in this moment where you feel like, well, it might not be right now where you're in the storm, but the storm will come. And if you do not have this peace, if you are not connected with life, with other believers who can speak into your life, who can encourage you in the way that you live, you will fall away. Listen, I've been a follower of Christ for 17 years now, and I need this more than I ever did before. I need this more than I ever did before. I need believers in my life to surround me and speak the truth. I need believers to rebuke me. I need believers to encourage me. I need to see how other people are following Jesus and how they're pursuing him, how they have a passion and a fire, how they're putting him first before everything. I don't know about you, but I need to see that in my life to keep my fire strong, because I want to live for Jesus with everything. I want to go into eternity running, not limping or walking. I want to go into eternity, fall across the line and say, Jesus, it was you, and you gave people to encourage me.